Brown says, get that India. Big boy.
Call an ambulance! Maybe call a priest! Oh, what a shot! What a shot! Campbell killer!
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Tip Sheet. As always, I'm your host, John, also known as 4020. Joining me to put the official death rights on the Parramatta Eels 2023 season is my good mate, Sixties. Big fella with that 34-12 loss to the Roosters tonight. It is official. The Eels are now no longer in the hunt for the finals. Not that they ever really were coming into this game, if we're going to be brutally honest. And I think a lot of our preview talk reflected that. But yeah, a few things to discuss tonight nonetheless.
Well, mate, I'm going to award myself 3 points for staying to the end of the game.
For the players not to come up and engage the fans as well.
Yeah, so, I guess I hung in there for 80 minutes. I think there was evidence there that our team, again, competed for the first 20 minutes of the game, as they did last week. And then after that, well, you know what? This was just right off the scales in terms of incompetence tonight.
It was comical at points, wasn't it? Guys dropping ball 10 metres out, Guffo, Kiri doing an awful kick and Guffo somehow taking a look and dropping the ball. Missed tackles, bad offloads, running himself into the corner and into trouble. Even Will Penasini having a chance to score and put the Eels ahead. 2 tries to nil at that point?
Yep. Yes.
And
in fact, that was it was after that try was missed that the run of possession and tries commenced for the Roosters.
Yeah, so an absolute comedy of errors as the Eels bid goodnight to their season. But before we dive too far further into the review or the post-mortem, however you want to carve it up this way, 60s, quick shout out to the sponsors of the show. I'm not sure they want to be associated with tonight, but we're going to throw them in there. Big Swing Golf, North Mead, and Star Partners Real Estate, Auburn, Rowan, and Parramatta, who have been fantastic in their consistency this year. Big shout out to them, obviously doing wonderful things for us in the show. But let's get into it, mate. 34-12 in favour of the Sydney Roosters tonight. The Eels fare well in CommBank Stadium in the complete opposite of style. Bryce Cartwright and Quinton Gufferson scoring for the blue and gold. Guffo tacking on his 2 conversions from those 2 attempts. And then for the Roosters, Tedesco got a double. Swali'i also bagging a brace. Young forward Wong scoring in the 68th minute off a comical bounce pass that skidded past about 12 players and got to him. And then that Butcher scoring in the 79th minute. Swali'i having a pretty good night off the tee, 5 from 6. Roosters marginally ahead in possession by 51 to 49%. They completed relatively efficiently, 75%, 30 or 40. Eels, very ordinary, 29 to 42 for 69% completion rate. Roosters ahead in all key attacking stats, run meters, post-contact meters, 10 line breaks to 4. It feels like it's the 5th straight game that the opponents have just dominated the line breaks column against the Parramatta Eels. 53 tackle breaks to 25. Eels actually had a faster play the ball speed, which is always bad news. Eels had more offloads with that manic passage of second phase play at the back end of the game. And then after that, Eels down at 80% effective tackle rate, which again tells you everything you need to know about how committed they were defensively tonight, which is to say not very. And then the Roosters actually end up conceding less penalties. I thought it was 4-3, but it's actually 5-4 the other way. So, yeah, another game where the Eels didn't win the penalty count, but that certainly isn't my gripe tonight. In terms of individual stuff, 60s, I'm not sure if it's worth shouting out, but we had a couple of players going over 200. Gufferson, 202, Reg 199, and then the backs, Simonson and Dill over 150, and then a couple of forwards over 100. Tackles, well, lots of missed tackles. Did anyone have a good night defending? Not really. Wiremu Greg made 14 tackles and missed 0, so well done to the big fella. And after that, Wiremu was 14 made, 0 missed. After him, there were only 2 Eels with a singular missed tackle, which somehow is Marcus Evo and Brendan Hands. Hands actually made 25 tackles and missed one, so he was good. But after that, each and every single Eel had at least 2 missed tackles or more. Topping the count was Bryce Cartwright with 9, Junior 8, Lussick 5, Simonson 5, and it goes from there. So the stats backing up the eye test in this case for all the wrong reasons. And the Eels, signing off from the season at CommBank in very, very ordinary fashion, big fella.
Well, let's rip the Band-Aid off, because in terms of competing in basically the last month and a half, our team is pretty much thrown in the towel.
It's so bizarre given how much they fought to the death for the rest of the season, but it just feels like they ran out of petrol.
Well, I spoke about this when we had our preview podcast, and I said my greatest concern was the mindset of the team, that they were now not believing that they were going to have any chance of winning. And I don't care, like, you know, there's such a thing as truly believing. Like, they could carry on with all the lip service that they want. Tonight, the Roosters at times were almost as incompetent as what the Eels were.
Yeah, exactly.
But there was a big difference, which was the Roosters looked like they really wanted to win this. And there were moments where their effort plays were evident, where our effort plays weren't. Now, I'm not saying that the Eels were devoid of effort. What I'm saying is that there was not a focused effort. Now, I'll give an example. The try that Will Penasini missed, you could see the effort from the Roosters there, like right to the last minute. The arm, I can't remember. I know Lindsay Collins was involved in the tackle. He was coming over the top, and then there was someone else there. As Will Penasini was trying to reach over and plant the ball, this arm came up.
That was Collins'
at the
arm.
ball.
Yeah,
and it was, that effort play. It stopped the Eels from getting to that a 12-point lead, and not only that, it completely then swung the momentum of the game. And Parramatta just did not have the resilience or the mental focus to go with the Roosters from that point. It's almost like, the same happened last week. As soon as something didn't quite go the way that we needed it to, the resilience just, maybe caved in is too strong a word, but it was like all of a sudden the focus wasn't there. And what I mean by focus is, it was like there were errors tonight of such. They were so simple, some of the errors. It was as if the players weren't concentrating.
Yeah, I think the coaches and the players both got it badly wrong this week is probably the nicest way I can put it. They switched Dylan Brown to the right edge, but then whether the game script called for it or the players audibled, I don't know. They then ran all their players down the left edge through Dejan Arce, to the point where Arce was doing most of the attacking kicking, including he shanked it off the opening attacking kick of the game, and it sailed well deep in goals. And then you go to scrums where, again pointing to the coaching staff, the Roosters scored twice with ease off scrums, coming after a week where the Broncos picked us apart from scrums. What are we doing here?
I can't answer that. I really can't, because it's the sort of thing that they train to stop. But I guess if the attack that they're training against at training isn't asking the same questions whether they're satisfied with it or not. The evidence there in the game there's two points of evidence where something's going wrong around the scrums. One is that the opposition are scoring with ease. Secondly, it's that we're not scoring when we're presented with similar opportunities. Like, there are questions that opposition teams are able to ask most efficiently.
We usually settle for a prop running at first receiver, but we did mix it up tonight, and I led to Dylan Brown making a line break. So, we clearly have guys, even without Mitchell Moses playing, that can still threaten from a scrum when you get the ability to post up in those, 1v1, 2v2, 3v3 spots. But, yeah.
See, I'll tell you what I don't understand. This is the part I don't understand, is that throughout the early part of the season, I watched a whole variety of scrum plays that we worked on. And I don't know, they've just disappeared. So I don't know whether
in
the
back
coaches
pocket for
have asked them to
2024
be put aside, or whether they've, or whether the players have seen them put aside. And in fact, you're familiar with some of them, 40, because they were putting on the same plays in junior reps.
Yeah.
And they were actually quite effective,
Yes.
these plays. And they had variations on them. And we spoke to some of the other coaches about like the junior rep coaches about the variations that they have on these plays. So, yeah. I mean, what can you say? I mean, the thing was, and I mean, I don't know whether people might have thought I might be emotional or really angry after tonight. I'd used up all my emotional response to this game by half time, because I expected, I don't know whether it's foolishly, I expected a lot more fight from our team tonight, because they were still in the battle to get into finals football. I mean, like, in retrospect, I can look at that now and go,
well, they clearly didn't think they were in the fight, did they? They were playing like a team that season was over.
Yeah. And I mean, did they or did they not look like a team who was ready for the season to end? And guess what? They will be the first team to end the season, because we've got a bye in the last round. A bye that
Mad Monday starts this week for them.
Yep. I mean, it is completely useless, the bye, for where it falls for us now. But our team has made that a useless bye. Our team has made that a useless bye. Not the NRL. So I'm not going to blame the NRL for us getting a bye in the final round. I mean, if you're playing finals football, you're probably pretty happy about that. I mean, the players now get an early holiday. That's the effectiveness of the bye coming in the last round. You get an early holiday. And I was speaking about this to some people through the week, which is, if you're the coaches, what do you do with this season? Now, we've witnessed Eels training into the end of the season and the final series where they haven't qualified for the finals, and BA has made them train through the finals.
Conversely, in 2016, when they didn't make the finals but earned it, I believe he gave them the time off that there would have been. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when they deserved it, he's given them the time off. On the flip side, when they haven't, he's worked them. But then again, so obviously they deserve to be flogged, right? Like they're playing like bastards. They're falling apart. So you want to work them, but it's also been an incredibly long season coming off that World Cup. So what's the right course of action here?
That was going to be the question, because right now, I think all Eels supporters want to put this season behind us. I mean, there are supporters out there that are looking for some level of retribution for, the axe to fall, people to be sacked, anything from players to coaches to executives. There's plenty of heads being called for at the moment. What has to be decided upon is, first of all, do they put this season immediately behind us and just go, you know what, go off, have your break. We'll see you back when the work resumes. Now, my concern is that we've got 27, by my count, players locked in. And that basically includes, I think, everyone that we saw in action tonight. Now, if that's, I think I have Luca Moretti down as being on a development contract next year. So I think that's the major difference in between this year and next year, is that all the players are locked in. All the players that we saw tonight, except for Luca, are top 30.
So there's not exactly a lot of wiggle room to make things happen and change the squad. Yeah.
So how is there a difference going into next year? I've put that forward to Eels supporters in the series of posts, which is, look, how can we expect anything different next year? What we've got is, this is how I'm viewing it, we've got a playing group that look mentally beaten right now. I cannot see, without significant change to the roster, that you are going to change that mindset. We need people in there who are mentally stronger, who have got a bit more fight in them. And I'm not saying that that none of the players out there have that fight in them, but they've got to channel it from somewhere. Somehow they're not channeling any fight in their performance. They can't say that tonight had any true fight in it. I mean, where they are focused, where they are single-minded about getting the victory. Because what we saw tonight in attack was pretty insipid. What we saw in defence was, hey, look, it speaks for itself. What was the missed tackle count? It was like 57.
So 80% effective tackle rate with 57 missed tackles and 22 ineffective.
Yeah.
So, damn near, 80 combined missed and ineffective tackles.
Yeah. So they've doubled the missed tackles of the Roosters. And the thing was, I don't believe the Roosters were asking too many questions.
I think we flattered them up significantly. I think the Roosters are pretty ordinary tonight, and any committed team probably puts a sword to them.
Yeah, I agree there. It was there was. I'm looking at some of the players of the missed tackle counts, and it was just awful tonight. It really was. I mean, we could go through and list all these players and their missed tackle counts, but we have to talk about them as a collective. And I mean, for a start, there are players there that should be in New South Wales Cup at the moment. I'm not saying that they are New South Wales Cup standard players. I'm saying that they are performing at a standard that is New South Wales Cup.
Well,
if that.
I framed this game coming into it across both the news and the preview podcast 60s as a game that for me could potentially define whether the Eels need to start talking retool or rebuild. And given what we saw tonight, I do think the needles move towards a rebuild. I think there are still good pieces in this team, and I think with everyone healthy next year, we are a legitimate top 8 team. But it is hard to see us hanging with Penrith and the other top teams, whichever one can either emerges or stays as a consistent team next year from this year's crop of contenders. If you're being ruthless, I think you could take a pretty strong axe to the back line.
Oh yeah, and I think and I think you need to, and you have to look at who's getting because the bottom line is we have to free up some money, right? And we have to free up money to get better quality in some key positions. So if we look at the back line there, who's on reasonably good money that's not playing anywhere near what his salary
Well,
is?
the first one
out in
that
the
comes to mind is the one that we chose to re-sign this year, and that's Mike Acevo.
Yeah.
You know, he'd be. I couldn't give you a monetary figure, but I imagine he'd be earning at a pretty healthy tier of NRL winger sort of salary. Will Penasini, he had a bad game tonight, but he's not the problem. You know, Will has a very bright future ahead of him. Simonson, again, hard to tell given that he came from Canberra. I don't know if there's any sort of split payments there, but he's obviously sort of trended backwards or maybe regressed to the mean. He obviously had a hot run through the midpoint of the season, but we're seeing some, issues popping up now consistently. And Sean Russell, you'd think would be the lowest paid player in our back line. And as I said earlier, last week, it's all a blur. If Sean Russell is either the worst player in your back line or the guy that's fighting for the final spot in your back line, that's a great spot for your back line to be in. But as it stands right now, he's a walk-up starter, no competition in the Parramatta backline. And
that's because there actually is no competition.
There is quite literally one or two backs behind him, and they've got their own problems in terms of injury or form.
Okay, so we're because this is the thing, right? We are, and this is the blunt assessment, and we're not pointing fingers at players here. So, if we've got people that are mates or family or what have you, this is just the reality of where things are at. So, the 4 outside backs tonight are 4 of a total of 6 outside backs who are currently signed to the Eels top 30 squad next year. The other 2 are Zach Seeney and Hayes Dunster. Now, I don't believe that Brad Arthur will be using Zach Seeney in first grade. He's had ample opportunity to use him in first grade. He hasn't. It's arguable that he hasn't been given a reason to use him in first grade. Then we talk about Hayes. Now, Hayes is at a point with his career that's completely out of his doing. He had the worst possible knee injury you could imagine. Basically every ligament gone in that injury. This year he's had other setbacks, other injury setbacks. I thought the fact that he has got himself back for the last game or 2 of the season is a credit to him. But right now, the Hayes Dunster that we're seeing is not able to do physically what the Hayes Dunster before his injury was able to do. So at the moment, Zach and Hayes are the depth players behind the 4 players that were out there tonight. That's where the roster is at in terms of the backline talent. Now, so I said to you before, and this we are now talking straight out numbers, value. If you look at who is producing according to the money that they're on, if you were to take an axe to the team and go, you know what, we need to cut some players to bring in, to have the money, right? Not to have the space, but to have the money to go out and make a purchase. the player in the current back line who'd be under the most pressure would be Micah Sivo, because he'd be on probably the most money out of those. Well, maybe Will Penasini might be arguable, but I'm going to put Will down as he's inexpendable.
Yeah, Will,
right?
Will is as close to an untouchable as we're going to have in our current roster.
Yep. So I'm not even going to look at Will, because he's one that you just straight out lock in. So if you look at the other players there, and you're talking about they're not going to be on much money, with the exception of Micah Sivo. So then you look at what sort of performance have we got out of Micah this season? Now, he had a fair number of tries, but let's be honest, he hasn't had to do Micah Sivo things to score those tries, has he? Like, not Micah Sivo at his best, right? So, and then what we're seeing from every supporter at the ground sees what happens with Micah with the backfield carries. They just don't happen. And we spoke about this the other night. They're probably just not. They're not smart carries.
No.
He's running directly into 2 or 3 defenders, and there is no leg drive. It's like he's trying to barrel them out of the way, and he's already falling into the tackle. So there's no tackle break that's happening. There's no yards that are being made. So if you're talking about return on investment, then you'd have to say he'd be in the target for people that you could potentially move on. And again, make no mistake, the Eels have to move players on.
But then obviously the other side of that coin is it's all well and good to open up a roster spot, open up some cap space, but the market is barren right now, and potentially you might need to bite the bullet, swallow the bitter pill that your recruitment needs to be targeted or angled or slanted towards season 2025.
Well, I think most supporters are going to acknowledge that, and grudgingly acknowledge that there may not be sufficient targets for us to recruit for next year. They really, it's, and don't get me wrong, that's bad. That's bad that we're in this position. There are, however, still some players out there that you could add to the roster and get better value than what we're currently getting. You have to be able to provide options. At the moment, there are no options. If you don't select the 4 that are there is no one else that you can select. I'm talking about next year. Now, remember this year, the Zaxini wasn't part of the top 30. Brad could have used him in the back half of the season if he so chose. But the players who were top 30 were Wonga Blake and Samuel Luizio. And Samuel's a player with a history of injury. And he'd acknowledge that as well. He's never been able to get any momentum in his career. And we're now still seeing him in Jersey Flegg this weekend. And Wonga, I think that's been storied enough, hasn't it? The unfortunate lack of self-belief that we've seen from Wonga in the last 12 to 18 months. So the tough decision, I think, is going to be, if you had a target that there was a chance of getting for next year, you'd probably have to look at releasing a player in the forwards who's on decent coin, and that's where it becomes really challenging. And I'm not sure that this is the right forum to be looking into that right now, because the recruitment committee would have to identify a target that they'd have a chance of getting before you start talking about, we're going to release this person or that person, because I mean, goodness knows we had enough releases last year that you would have thought that we might have been a bit better off money wise, but we've invested so much in our retentions that there just isn't the space in the recruitment. So, yeah, mate. I mean, we haven't got answers. We haven't got answers. Certainly after sitting through what we sat through tonight, we don't have any answers. What we must unequivocally know is that we cannot expect things to be much better unless there is a change, and a significant change to the roster for next year. We can't have the same 27 players, and I know we got those 3 spots to add recruitment. They would have to be almighty additions for a couple of extra players to make a difference.
I think right now, as it stands, there needs to be both, not just for the fans, for us, the pundits, but also internally, there might need to be an acceptance that next year is a bridging year, the way things are right now, that they need to make moves that will make them better the year after, and they can still be, competitive in terms of making the finals if everyone stays healthy. And then obviously once you're in the finals, anything can happen. But the way it stands, you're needing everyone to stay healthy, which just doesn't happen. You need the most blessed season ever, and it just doesn't happen. Especially, we've got some guys. I wouldn't call them injury prone, but the guys with a bit of injury history that can get caught up here and there. So, yeah, if that's the case, then you need to start looking at accelerating development of young kids, getting them into the mix in reserve grade and even first grade, and having a very defined and focused recruitment strategy. And like we said, maybe being ruthless in terms of pruning the roster. So that, multi-pronged approach gets you back to being competitive the year after.
How do you think supporters would react to us, to the club, regarding, if next year was treated as a bridging year, as a year to be in a holding pattern whilst they tried to work on some recruitment? Now, I put it to you this way, John, is that if you got to November when you can start talking to players about 2025, you would like to think that the Eels would start moving on someone now, if this is their plan, right? Mm-hmm. If they were going, there's nothing we can do about 2024. Sorry, supporters, you're going to have another year of either not making finals football and definitely not ending any title drought. But you know what? Hey, we're going to start chasing some players from 2025. And as far as I'm concerned, they'd have to have a couple of absolute rip snorter signings locked in before Christmas this year for me to be satisfied going into 2024 and it just being treated like a bridging year.
Well, speaking for myself, I've never seen us win a premiership. In other codes, other teams I follow, I have seen them win the equivalent of the NRL premiership, and it's been fantastic. But if I saw a focused and effective plan, I could cop it. If I saw that there was a commitment to improving the roster in the medium and long term, and a chance to get us back to being not just competitive, because that's an important distinction that needs to be made here too. It's not just being competitive; it's about committing to building a team that will win a premiership or at least can feasibly win a premiership. And that's a difference to what we've done the last 4 to 5 years. We've built a very good roster, but never went all in. So we need to get back to getting that roster to the tipping point and then finding the right time to go all in. So if they did do that, if they did have a very focused and obvious plan, and they weren't, just pushing pieces around saying, no, we're trying to make stuff happen, but we got to wait and see, then I'm okay with it. But if you're going to half-ass it, then obviously no. And then I would not begrudge any fan that would be upset about that. And on the same token, or by the same token, I wouldn't be begrudging any fan that would hate the idea of a bridging year, because after everything we've been through, it would suck to see us take half a step back. But like I said, in my mind, as a fan of a lot of other teams and other codes, and seeing some other droughts, including like seeing following a team that's been they've broken the drought since, but over 2 decades since they saw the playoffs in their particular code of sport, they're smart retooling, or even to the point where it's an actual rebuild, but done aggressively, focused, and with a very clear plan. I can cop that, but it needs to be smart and it needs to be well done. But again, if you don't want to borrow that, I can understand. My concern is not doing that leads you to the slow and painful decline, where you play out with all your core players aging year on year, and our core players, while they're still playing great football, they are getting older. So your window with them is starting to narrow and narrow and narrow. And if you're not aggressive, you can slip very quickly from contender for the premiership, which is where we're at, to contender for the top 8, which is where I think we're trending, to being just outright mediocre.
Well, based on the last, say, 6 weeks of football, I would suggest that we've looked more like a wooden spoon team than a top 8 contender.
That's not unfair.
And we've been without, a couple of players. But in reality, like last week, we were without, putting the injury to Mitch Moses aside, we went into last week primarily without Regan Campbell-Gillard and Micah Sevo. And I think what we saw in evidence tonight was that Micah Sevo is not a difference maker for the team this year. Like, whether he's playing or not playing matters little.
Mm-hmm.
Where the problem lies is whether the next man up is, the options there is going to make things better or worse. And unfortunately, we had a scenario where that next man up was Wonga. And Wonga is not, it's unfortunate, but he's not
the player he once was.
He's not the player he once was.
Yeah. That just is what it is. He is not the player he once was. On the other side, Hayes, you mentioned, is coming back from a major injury, and to his credit, he actually looked a bit better today. We can talk about
I thought Hayes had a very, very good game.
We can talk about the cup in a little bit, because that is the slimmest of silver linings to what we saw tonight. And we talked about all the young kids coming up there, and I thought the young kids stood up, outside of poor Richard Penasini, who was out of the game by the time we got to our seats with a concussion, which was obviously awful, and we wish him a speedy recovery. But yeah, like you said, just the depth isn't there. The frontline options aren't there right now. There's clear roster holes. The coaches have gotten it wrong in some obvious parts. We spoke about the scrum set pieces. Maybe swapping Dill around wasn't the right play from left to right, if you're going to play all your football down the left regardless. And we've spoken about, the way we contest the ruck. That's another thing that BA and the coaches have definitely gotten wrong. It just has not gone in their favour.
I think it's been well documented how I felt about a clean ruck this year.
Yeah, it's a noble concept, and I can respect, again, trying to go for a point of difference in this competition, especially when the referees tell you that they're going to be committed to a clean ruck. but that's obviously a lie. Might be too strong a word because obviously I don't think the referees want a dirty ruck, but I feel like they fall into the trap of the dirty ruck when every team is doing it. And the Eels,
see, they turned up at pre-season for the clubs and were laying down the law that was going to be strongly enforced. The teams had to be working towards a clean ruck, and there were going to be certain ways that they were going to call tackles and the movement off a tackle player, and just didn't happen. It didn't even make it to round one. I can assure you that the way it was supposed to be officiated didn't make it to round one. Like, the evidence was there, and by the time we'd gone about halfway through the season, we should have changed that up. We didn't, and I put that down as like a genuine mistake that was made. Was it a mistake that's cost us the season? No, not at all. There's been so many other things that have caused the season to unfold as it has, but I'm not going to step away from the fact that we get to a game like tonight and there were two different mindsets from the teams that were out there. One was positive, the other was negative. Both teams made multiple errors. One team was just a bit more focused than the other. I don't think the Roosters, if they do qualify for finals football, I don't think they're going to cause any sort of...
They're making up numbers. Yeah, they are there to pad out the final series for another team.
But the thing is, right, with the Roosters, is that they won't... I'll guarantee you this, John. The Roosters won't look on next year as a bridging year. Right? They've already got signings coming there for next year. They sorted that out early in the year. So they got Dominic Young.
Well, Dom Young would sure be good for Parramatta, wouldn't he? He's kind of the winger. We're looking for a guy that can ruck it out for 150 plus metres and finish tries with aplomb, but we were neither here nor there on that.
Yeah, and they've also got the big fella from Penrith.
Yes, off the interchange, not Leota. I know who you mean.
Spencer
Leniu, yeah. And look, obviously Leniu would be a nice fit for the Parramatta Eels as an impact forward, but he's looking to be a starter. I understand why we couldn't go into the market for him. We've also got... I don't think our middle rotation is our issue. Even with, Reg and Junior getting on, I think there's enough good talent in there with guys like Wideramu and what's coming through that we're in a decent position there. But the fact that someone like Dom Young can be on the market and be such an obvious fit for us, and we're not... Maybe we were in negotiations with him, but we weren't linked to him publicly, and we certainly weren't in the hunt for him at the end, as it looks like. So,
any player that we've been in the market for, something has caused us to not pursue it, whether it's been a bit more money that's been required by the player, whether it's been a length of contract, whatever the case may be. For some reason, we've ended up balking or pulling out of negotiations. There had to have come a point where we bit the bullet and signed someone where we needed someone. Signed a significant player that we needed, right? And see, this is what I have the greatest concerns about if we are prepared to just be in a holding pattern for next season. If we're prepared to be in a holding pattern for next season, right now, I don't have confidence that we would chase the sort of player that you would want us to be able to get for 2025, John, because I'm not sure you can give me any evidence that it's happened in the past.
Well, like we spoke about, we built this premiership roster since, 2018 was where we retooled. And then since then, 2019 to 2022, and then into this year, we've been in a very open premiership window. And what were our big free agent signings? Who's the X factor? Like, obviously, we did smart recruitment, and I'm never going to complain about smart recruitment.
Yeah.
Like guys like Isaiah Papali'i, great recruitment. They're the guys you need to constantly have to be ticking over. I get that. But
Isaiah Papali'i, great recruitment, poor retention.
Yeah, well, then obviously the flip side of that is, yes, we let him walk, which is kind of like, well, what's the point? You got him for a couple of years, made his name in the NRL, made him an all-star player, and then you let him walk. But at no point did we say, well, we're a player shy of being able to, in a deadlock game, in a stalemate, or when you're slightly behind against the Penrith Panthers, against the Melbourne Storm, who's the player that we can add that will give us a chance to bust that tackle, to split a line, to create the offload, to do something.
To take us to that next, that final step.
That's exactly right. And just never went and got him.
No.
So I can understand why you're reticent to then say, well, what are we going to do for 2025? So.
See, the thing was, like, when we were coming out of 2018 as a spoon year, right? And that was awful. And to be perfectly honest, I was going through tonight. I was having some of the thoughts, the emotions watching tonight as what I felt in 2018, and I really didn't think that I would feel that way so soon again. All right. When I say so soon, okay, so it's 5 years ago. But I just thought, especially the way we had been trending as a team, that I didn't think it was going to be possible for us to slide. Now, we mightn't have slid as much in terms of competition points on the competition table, but we're sliding in the way of our late season, the insipid form of the late season, because it is insipid, right? There's minimal fight in what we're doing. As I said, it looks like a group of players that want the season to be over. Mm-hmm. They're just mentally, they're done. They're cooked.
Yeah, I can't argue. Yeah, they are checked out. They clock in for a quarter of a game, and then the moment there's a bit of adversity, the minute there's a bad call, and Ashley Klein had another shocker tonight, by the way. Certainly not why the Eels lost, but he was atrocious. But
you know what? He did his best to match Parramatta's incompetence.
Yeah.
And you know what? And he normally does a pretty fair job of matching the incompetence of teams. And he was right up there tonight. There were things tonight, and I think his touch judges helped him along the way as well to find those heights of incompetence. But he wasn't the reason for Parramatta losing. That's why we're not jumping into him, right? But he was awful. He was absolutely awful tonight. Mm-hmm. So I'll come back to it. Coming out of 2018, I was feeling positive about what 2019 had to offer, because not only did we have the young players that were coming up, and we knew Dylan Brown was going to play first grade straight away. Right? There was no question about that. There was going to be an immediate change to the halves. So that was there. And the other players, we knew they were going to put pressure on the first grade. So coming into the season, there was going to be pressure on positions. But there was also the key recruits that had been made. By the time before the season, that spoon season was over, we knew that Blake Ferguson had been recruited. We knew that this lower grade sensation, Mike Acevo, had been added to the squad. We knew as well that we had Junior coming back. We knew also that we had Sean Lane coming across from memory as well. He was another addition. I'm pretty sure I'm getting the dates right with these additions of these players. But so there was those key recruits, because we knew we weren't getting yardage from the wingers in 2018. So we brought in big-bodied, fast wingers that were going to provide what was missing in 2018, and a couple of big, strong forwards as well that were going to make a point of difference. So we could see recruits. What do we see? Where's the recruits? There's none. Okay, and John, you said it. You said it correctly. There is still some good key players in the Eels team. We're not going to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but it is an aging team. We've got an average age of over 27. I think there will be about 8 players in the, if not the starting 13, then definitely in the 17, who will be 30 years of age or over next season. I mean, that's a big number. And when I said the average age is 27, that's the average age of the squad, not of the first grade, the likely first grade team. So based on tonight, you've got Mitch Moses missing, you've got Sean Lane missing. Now, if they were injected into tonight's game, would they have brought about a win? No. Too many other players were just playing awful football.
Yeah, they're not making all those missed tackles. You know, obviously they help, but yeah, we had way too many holes in the lineup tonight.
Yeah. So there's my concern, John. My concern is we need new faces in there to get a different outcome. I don't think it's a matter of, the players get to go away and reset, recharge. I think they need to turn up and see someone different alongside them. I really do. Now, maybe that's the ideal way that we can segue into having a quick chat about what we witnessed in New South Wales Cup tonight. Now, just before we do, I don't know about you, John, but I can't do a 3-2-1.
No, again, I think it's the same as last week. If you drove up from, regional New South Wales, from Canberra, from Central Coast, from South Coast, God help you if you came from the interstate and you made the trip to CommBank for the final game of the season or the final home game, then you deserve the 3 points.
Yes.
If you're a Sydney sider like myself or Sixties and you attended to the end, then you get a very strong 2 points. And if you watch the game on TV for the full 80 minutes, then I'll give you 1 point. Because that's where we're at. The team has not put in the last 160 minutes. I think you could generously say that they've played 40 minutes of committed football.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 3-2-1.
40 minutes of focused football.
Yeah. 3-2-1 definitely goes to the fans that gritted their teeth and persevered, and especially the ones that stayed at CommBank hoping that, yes, while the team was disappointed, that they might engage the fans and say goodbye for the final home game instead of the token stuff that they got. So it's a real sticking point there, I think, is that I don't want to say they're taken for granted, 60s, but I see what other teams do. You see what other teams do. You've been very vocal about this to me and in other capacities. Visiting teams like St. George, like Penrith, will come in, and Penrith had their hearts broken against us this year. They lost in Golden Point after kicking an incredible field goal to take it to extra time, and yet they went round and engaged their fans at Parramatta, and we're not doing the same to our own home fans. So, not impressed in that regard, but it's been a long-standing issue.
Yeah. Oh, look, I don't know if you noticed this at halftime, but it's. I wasn't. I was left shaking my head, and I might be a bit pedantic with this, but when we have our match hosts, who I think do a reasonable job with the vibe that they maintain in the stadium, can I just remind them that the Eels' colours are blue and gold, not blue and yellow?
Yeah.
And when they say, that someone bleeds blue and yellow,
talking about the Titans.
they're, I mean, it. You know,
Like it sounds like a Peden, but like they are our colours, blue and gold.
Yeah, I mean it smacks of, you know, like hosts for hire scenario. You know, you do look, as I said, I think they do a very good job. They've been doing the work for the Eels now for, I guess, the best part of 18 months or something like that. Come on, be a bit better than that. No, I mean, it might have been a slip of the tongue. You know, it's like Reid Marnie was when he was speaking at the Bulldogs earlier this year, and got that wrong. But yeah, I don't know, call me pedantic. I just after the first half, hearing that at halftime, it just
certainly rubbed some salt into the wounds, didn't it?
Yeah, it did rub some salt into the wounds. So
all right, well,
yeah, okay. So we're gonna
have it. It's not a panacea, but let's have a nice little palate cleanser, because the curtain raiser on Friday night on tonight was a very, very good New South Wales Cup victory, 22-12 over the Sydney Roosters. Eels prevailing with a host of young players, either starring or having really good performances. 60s. Wanga Blake started the scoring in the 5th minute, and that was care of an excellent Joshua Lynn kick. Hayes Dunster, Makasi Makatoa, and Jordan Rankin tacking on. Rankin kicking 2 conversions, and Josh Lynn also scoring a penalty goal while Rankin was in the sin bin for a jersey pull on a line break. On the Rooster side, Tavita Hinare Schuster scored first of them. Former Eels prospect Noel Akafalau scored when the game was all but academically over in the 76th minute. Jackson Barlaw banging over 2 conversions. I mean, I say humorously, but I actually am worried that there are some legit anger issues here for the man. Nathan Brown sin bin twice in this game, once for a dangerous tackle, pretty reminiscent of the one that he got sent off for in the NRL a couple of weeks ago. 60s went off his feet and got Jonte Junior Beffin-Meza high. Came back on. I don't know what was said between he and Jack Murchie, but Brown was in possession, played the ball, got up and engaged Murchie in I wouldn't say it was handbags at 10 paces sort of thing, but they grabbed each other, and then Murchie kept it cool, didn't do anything silly, while Nathan Brown took a couple of wild swings at him and didn't really connect, but it still got sin-binned. So that happened there. But yeah, I'll let you lead the conversation here, but I thought that there was a host of young players outside of poor Richard Penasini, who was concussed by the time we got to our seats, as we mentioned earlier. So he missed the entire game, essentially. That had very, very good games here.
Well, I thought Josh Lynn, for someone who is, this might have been his 3rd game.
Yeah, 3 games deep.
I thought he was very confident in the halves. It was everything that he did had a air of positivity about it. You know, whereas we were talking about the NRL team and maybe having that negative mindset, I thought everything that he did out there looked like, even if it didn't quite work, he had a goal that was a positive goal and kept working towards that. I just thought he's come on in leaps and bounds, I think, this year.
Yep.
The early part of the SG ball season, it really looked like he hadn't, you know, like he was still settling in, that he wasn't entirely sure of his role. Now, he came to Parramatta with very good raps from Queensland, and I can now understand why those raps were so big. So now the Eels really need for him to be stepping up, and the role is essentially his, I believe, because with Ethan Sanders moving to the Raiders, there was, well, I guess he's maybe going to get the opportunity that would have been coming Ethan Sanders' way. So, yeah, I was impressed with him tonight. What did you think of Josh Lynn's performance?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to go to the tape and they'll definitely be able to pick apart some areas where he, you know, slipped up. I think there was a missed tackle at one point where he went for an ankle tap and he could have, you know, dived on the break, and there was I think the pass from Jordan Rankin was pretty ordinary, but he had a chance to dive on it and let it go by. So they're little bits he can clean up, obviously, but I was very impressed by the confidence and the composure His kicking game was outstanding. 60s, like his attacking kicking game, he did not put a ball wrong. He forced multiple line dropouts. His kick for Wanga Blake was so good for that opening try that it felt like Wanga who was stuck in second or third gear and scored in spite of himself for that try. Like,
yeah, it was quite extraordinary, wasn't it? It was like we're both yelling out, "Run, Wonga!" because we could see that the weight that was put on the ball was perfection, and the Roosters winger looked to be struggling to get back, and yeah, Wonga, he barely looked like he got out of.
He got there and scored, but
yeah.
like if he'd been even a fraction quicker, he could have centered that ball to the posts. But yeah, he looked very composed, which is great to see, because one of the things that the young kids will tell you when they step up to these grades, and in our interviews, like on the official stuff that we've been able to put out, they always talk about how the speed of the game comes at you so quickly. Lynn didn't look like he was rushed. He looked quite composed, and the Roosters went after him, as they should have. It's a young playmaker. You got to try and rattle him. And while there were, the odd blemish here or there, I was very impressed on the body of his work, especially considering that, I think it's fair to say that our cup team isn't exactly at full strength with all the tools around him in terms of the senior players. So he was making do with, not a patchwork left edge, but, guys that maybe wouldn't have taken advantage of his talents as well as, a different team might have.
Yeah, I also thought Charlie Guymer gave us exactly what I expected him to give us.
He really came into that game in the second half, I thought, because he came in early because, unfortunately, Richard Penasini was ruled out. And I think he was sort of getting a feel for the game in the first half, but in the second half, he was not quite a tour de force in defence, but a bit of a man possessed. He was out there really making a stamp, multiple tackles in a row, great reads, good jams. He once again looked like a player far more seasoned in experience in this grade than you would have thought otherwise.
Yeah, he's tough. He's just so tough.
Just built like a tank, but plays the game so smart. So, the Liam Martin comparison was the one we made earlier this week because of their geographical similarity from where they came from. But he is such a throwback player, isn't he? Just like robust, gets involved so well on both sides of the ball, isn't afraid to put his body on the line, running or tackling. You can see why coaches would love a player like Charlie Guymer.
Yeah. Matthew Arthur, Buds.
Yeah, a bit of a show stealer tonight, wasn't he?
We're used to his immaculate passing game. I thought he took that to another level tonight. Just the way he was snapping those.
He was just ripping it off the carpet there at CommBank. You saw the immediate tempo swing, and Jaden Yates had a good game actually. Jaden had a couple of really nice runs. Busy in defense, but there's the tempo difference when Buds came on and was just putting his playmakers on the front foot consistently. Leading them to where they needed to be for their place. So it was like he was almost preempting the backline movement with great service. So he was, and it wasn't just that. He jumped out of dummy half a number of times of sharp, incisive runs. I think one of his first touches was a 11, 12 meter scoot down that right edge, taking the Eels onto the goal line, and then it culminated with what was actually a great sequence of young players linking up together. I think it was Jonte Jr., Beth and Meza fed a short ball to Charlie Guymer that put him through a half gap. Charlie went back infield because he was never going to make it to the line, took the tackle, got the play of the ball to set up Buds, who just jumped out, pulled in the defense and flipped it to Makesi Makatoa, who just powered through the contact to probably, that was when I said the Eels took control of that game within the 55th minute with that try. So, yeah, Buds was fantastic. They tried to pick on him in defense. I haven't got the numbers here yet because it wasn't a Foxtel game, so we don't get the live updates. But I don't think he had a bad game defensively by any means. 60s. It'd be interesting to see what the tape says on that. But he certainly was getting involved in defense, which you love to see. And then, the player that probably got the smallest minutes. Well, again, I feel bad for saying that with Richard Penasini getting knocked out. But outside of Richard's unfortunate injury, the player who got the smallest minutes was Sam Tuivaiti, and I still think he made a difference in this game. He came on, forced an error of a great hit on a cutback tackle through the middle where the Roosters were threatening to open things up, and he just jammed and knocked them over, and then some really good runs. And what I got to say about Sam is McIntyre and Ogden. I mean, they're not the biggest props in the game, but they're not small. Ogden in particular is a pretty reasonable sized lad, and from our vantage point, it looked like Sam towered over them. Like they packed together into the front row at one point, and he was quite clearly the biggest of the three.
Yeah, and that was what we were looking at tonight, was how do these young blokes go physically? Now, Sam is only 18 this year. He turns 19 next year.
Actual baby.
Massive, yeah, but a massive tick physically. Now, we know that players, there's some, stars in the NRL who've had that physicality from the time they were also teenagers. Now, I don't know. It's hard to put a prediction on when a player like Sam might crack, his NRL debut. But given what I saw tonight in terms of his capacity to match it physically, I wouldn't even be surprised if that were to happen some stage next year.
He is the sort of player that, given his mindset, his skill set, and his physical attributes, all it takes is just one preseason where he could just explode. Like, he has the right growth spurt, comes in hungry, and he can go from being an outside NRL prospect, given his age, to being right in the mix for a bench spot, in the blink of an eye. He has all the tools to do that. He is look, phenom is a word you don't want to throw around loosely, because, as soon as you say that, fans start saying, well, he's got to play this year. He's got to play State of Origin, a year into his NRL career. But Sam's got all the tools to be a very, very good player.
Yeah. So I already covered with Charlie Guymer his physicality. So no dramas at all, him with the physicality of an open age competition there.
Nope.
Same, you mentioned that composure of Josh Lynn. And we were even talking about how, from a size perspective, that he matched up.
Yeah, it was almost bizarre, wasn't it? Because we were so used to him in that SG ball team looking like, not like he was tiny, but he looked like the quintessential junior halfback, didn't he?
Then when you think about the players that he was alongside in that competition, I mean, you're talking about Sam Tuivaiti, who's a monster, Lance Fulima, who's even bigger still, LeBron Tuala, who's bigger yet again, and even out in the backs in having Richard Penasini, Blaze Talangi, who are both bigger than Josh, and also
even
I guess
his halves partner Ethan Sanders, who is freakishly large for a halfback. Like, Ethan stands high 180s and is well built for a halfback. Like, he is well outside of the mold of a classic halfback. So seeing those two together, and Arpa Tweedle, another really solidly built fullback. All these guys in the back line and the forward pack are big units, and Lynn sort of got lost amidst the sauce and all that, didn't he? And seeing him out there in Reggie's, and maybe he's tacked on some mass. Like, maybe he's been busy dietary and gym wise, getting into a senior football shape. And again, at that age where you can put on those kilos in a good way, unlike us 60s. It's easy to put in the kgs for us, but not the good ones. But Lynn quite possibly has been very busy, because he did not look tiny out there. He looked like a guy that very much fit the mold of an NRL playmaker.
Yep. I guess the only player that the question is over in terms of the size at the moment is Buds Arthur, but that's never been an issue for him, because he's a renowned for his legs tackles and his courage, and as you mentioned earlier, John, the Roosters could have picked him out and targeted him. The fact that they didn't, or at least it didn't look like they had, says a lot about him and how he does play, and also that the try assist that he put on that you described before that was scored by Mackenzie Makatoa, he ran right up to the line before he offloaded to Makahesi, and he copped a whack.
Yeah, he put his body on the line to secure the try. He knew what was coming and did the right thing. So it's not a question of toughness of Woods.
Anyone who was there tonight knows what we're dealing with Arthur as a dummy half. Like he is one out of the box. He is going to be an NRL star dummy half. And as I said, anyone that saw that tonight, I mean, people used to rave about Reed Marnie's long pass. Well, we were seeing that from Woods, except the ball was sizzling.
Yeah, he was ripping it.
Sizzling. So, like he's going to benefit from a season or two of big pre-seasons. But you've got that the way he reads a game, what he's got between the ears, let alone the ticker. It's in that sort of stuff's in rare commodities, and the Eels have let his older brother Jake go. I hope they do everything in their powers to ensure that they don't lose Woods, because, as I said, if not for the fact that BA is his father, he would very quickly become a crowd favourite, because he's
it's a curse.
Doesn't mind
the surname's a
mixing
curse in this case, isn't it? 60s.
Yeah, but he loves mixing it. He loves getting in the faces of opposition players or getting in their ears a little bit. He is a classic dummy half in that regard. He's probably right out of the Michael Ennis mould when it comes to keeping opposition players on the edge of their self-control. So look, I guess what it comes down to is we had a curtain raiser tonight that gave us a glimmer of the sort of players that can make a difference. But I said this in the post that I wrote, the Spotlight post. Even having potential NRL players coming up through your pathways is not a reason for the Eels to think, okay, we're going to be right for the talent because we've produced it ourselves.
And if anything, having a strong group of kids coming through should make your external recruitment even more hyper-focused, because it gives you a better scope to understand where your needs are, where you can lavish a few extra dollars and go above your sort of given budgets in order to find the player that can put you over the top. So,
absolutely. What we need to see is the recruitment. It has to be, well, as you said, it has to be ultra focused. We have to be proactive with it. There has to be very specific targets. There has to be a recruitment action plan about what is required to get these targets across the line. And it needs to be that, I guess there has to be some flexibility in the negotiations. It seems to be that, maybe we haven't had the flexibility. Maybe we haven't had the wiggle room that negotiators might need to get someone across the line. Whatever it is, whatever the problem's been, we just know that it hasn't worked. Like the big recruitment just hasn't worked, or not so much the big recruitment, the necessary recruitment hasn't worked. And mate, I don't know if there's too much more we can say other than the fact that we will be out at Ringrose Park covering the Eels Jersey Flegg team as they attempt to qualify for finals football. They've sort of probably been like the Roosters were tonight in that they've got talent in the team. They've had some matches where they've maybe given away points or the result with, a subpar game here or there. But they've really found their groove in recent weeks. There's a lot of the boys there that have come up from the SG ball. But as I said, they've found their groove. They've got a great self-belief. They really do. So if they get into the finals, they will do some damage. Don't worry about that. Whether they can do it this week without those players that played tonight, that's going to be the big question that needs to be answered. So I guess watch this space tomorrow because we'll be covering it for you. And mate, I think anything you want to add about that, John?
No, I think it's the perfect place to sign off. I don't know if Go You Eels is in order right now, 60s, but
well, look, I guess again, thank you to our sponsors, Big Swing Golf, Northmead, Star Partners, Real Estate, Auburn, Narellan and Parramatta. Another thank you as well to Parramatta Leagues Club, the home of the Eels. They do try to make that your club there the place where Eels supporters can go in and feel like it is truly the home of supporters. We've enjoyed being there all through the year in Jack's Bar and Grill. We had another great night tonight with Steve Ella in there. We might tack on our chat with Steve at the end of this podcast so that you can have a bit of a listen to our pre-game chat with him, because there was a lot more chat about rugby league in general and the players recently, their opportunity to get together, Steve's thoughts on various aspects of the game. So it's only a little bit of a preview about it really towards the end where we're talking about specifics with the game tonight. So I think it's an interesting chat with Steve Ella. We had a nice full house of people there very early in Paraleagues because we were on before 5 o'clock tonight. So thank you to everyone who's listening now who was also there in the club earlier tonight. We really appreciate the fact that you get there, that you support the Eels, that you support us in what we've tried to do in Jack's Bar and Grill in Parramatta Leagues Club throughout the year. And again, thank you to Parramatta Leagues Club for being the home of the Eels and for supporting what we do in our podcasts for Eels supporters. Again, thank you to everyone for listening. And yeah, I'm going to say it because we've got a match tomorrow. Go you mighty Eels.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Jack's Bar and Grill for our pre-match coverage of the Eels versus the Roosters. We are the Cumberland Throw. This is my good mate, John, who writes as 4020. I'm Craig, I write as 60s on the Cumberland Throw. And we are honoured tonight because we have one of the legends of the Parramatta Eels. He's a 4-time premiership winner. He's played 153 first-grade games for Parra, 94 tries, 104 goals, 6 field goals. Everyone, can you please welcome Steve Ella?
Hello, everyone.
Okay, we got there. It was probably a long time overdue, Steve, but when did you find out about the premiership rings happening for that squad?
We probably found out about that a week before. We got invited to a luncheon, which was nice, but I suppose to put it in context, when we won 4 premierships, we didn't expect anything for it. We never got anything for it, which was okay, but I think now that when teams win premierships, they get rings, and it was a really lovely and special gesture from the club to recognise that. It was probably a good opportunity to recognise. And it was 40 years since we won our 3rd premiership. And I know they tried to organise this back in 2 years ago. COVID stopped it. I know they tried to organise again last year. I know COVID stopped it again. And So this is the third time they had a crack at it, and it was just a great opportunity for us to get together and celebrate.
Putting faith to the adage, third time is the charm indeed, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it was the third premiership that we won, and 40 years since then.
So you said that obviously that it did mean a lot to receive those premiership rings. I mean, in terms of receiving it 40 years later, is the buzz still, just as much to get it, or is it the sort of thing that really is about the memories and the camaraderie?
Oh, absolutely. It was exciting for us. I suppose there's a couple of things. It's exciting for us to get together as mates, because all the guys that I play with, wonderful players, but wonderful people, and it's always great to catch up with them. But for us, it was more important that the club recognised us and the achievements, and our supporters recognise that and our achievements. And I think we get more of a kick out of not what we achieve, but what the club recognised us in that achievement, and our supporters as well. And we get more of a kick out of supporters being happy about it.
We saw you back here in the club later that night. It seemed like everyone thoroughly enjoyed the ceremony, joined the occasion. We know for a fact that for the Blue and Gold reunion later on this season, which was last home game, that the boys kicked on and had a big night. Was that the same case there for you boys, catching up and sharing a few more beers out in Parramatta?
Well, I'm getting on, so kicking on's really hard these days. Look, when we get together, we always have a good laugh, always have a good time, and kicking on these days is totally different than how we used to kick on back in the early days. So it's just nice to catch up.
Well, I mean, we were given the privilege of David Lydiard jumping up unannounced and joining us here that night when we were doing our post-match chat here in Jack's Bar and Grill. I believe it was unusual, however, that he kept his shirt on. Is that the case?
Well, David keeping a shirt on is very unusual in any circumstances, so yeah.
So one of the other things too, one of the other people we've had as a guest recently, Muggo, he described how each year, back in the days when there were no premiership rings, there'd be a blazer that was handed out, but as far as the Parramatta Eels was concerned, it wasn't a matter of getting a new blazer every year when you won the 3 in a row. It was a matter of adding a new pocket onto it with a different stitching of what premierships had been won.
Yeah, that's actually a true story, and the problem was, as the years got on, you grew in size, so the blazer didn't fit, so you never got to wear it anywhere. But I suppose we also understood that the club had financial pressures back then, and so for us it wasn't an issue of actually not getting anything, because we knew what we did and how important it was for the club and for our supporters. But yeah, it's just really nice to be recognised by the club recently.
And while we're talking about Muggo, he shared a cracking story with us when he was on the tip sheet about how Gibbo consulted a stray dog whether to decide on whether he was going to drop him or not. Can you confirm if that story is true or not?
Well, it is actually true, because Jack had some very quirky ideas, and it depends how the dog reacted, depends how he made a decision sometimes. But I mean, it's a really good story, but he probably made a decision before that anyway. So.
Well, he said that one of the things about Gibbo was that basically he did keep you on your toes with the unexpected, with that sort of thing. Is that a fair comment?
Well, it is. He always done things differently to most other coaches, and we weren't, I suppose, prepared for a lot of things that he threw at us, which was really good for us because it made us keep on our toes. But when you talk about dogs, Paul Taylor gave him a dog once, and it was a purebred, and ended up dying after about 3 days. So he always referred to Paul Taylor as the dog killer.
Just keeping on the catching up with old mates theme, we did see you on the Sunday of the reunion the other week here. Did you see anyone there on that reunion weekend that you hadn't caught up with for a period of time?
I suppose one of the good things about reunions is when you go and catch up with people you haven't seen for a long time. But I actually caught up with about 4 or 5 guys. I started at Parramatta in 1977. I was a 17-year-old with Eric Roth. We both started on the the same time, and I caught up with 5 guys I played my very first game at Parramatta with in 1977. And that was really nice. I hadn't seen them since then.
And there's probably a lot of people aren't aware that you started with the club that early and that young because you had that injury in, what was it 78, 79 that you had the...
79 was when I snapped both my cruciates and my medial in my left knee. I was just 18 then. But that was in 79, but Eric and myself started in 77.
I mean, you both of you go back a long way, don't you? Like to the actual junior club together.
Yep. Eric Grace and myself grew up together and played juniors together. Went through all the Parramatta junior reps together. When we actually got signed at Parramatta, we actually got signed on the same day, and the guy who came and spoke to us both together at the same time. So it was always together.
I've got to imagine that a tactic for your junior team had to be get the ball out to you two fellas.
Oh no, it's just give it to me, I'll just give it to Eric. That's always the plan.
We've seen how fantastic the player reunions are, what the Blue and Gold Alliance does for the former players and staff members of the club, but how important is it for you guys to stay connected?
I mean, it's like anybody who plays in a team, it's always nice to stay connected with your mates, and we had a special bond. I suppose what kept us together was that we were good mates. A lot of us had opportunities to go to other clubs, and we all said no because we wanted to stay with our mates. And I mean, a lot of junior clubs are like that as well, because you know who you play with in your juniors. You stay mates with them forever. Whatever sport you play, you always stay friends with the people that you play with. So it's no different. For us, it's just an opportunity for us to catch up on a regular basis, and we do that as much as we can.
And of course, the other part of staying connected is you always want to check in on everyone because invariably someone's going to pass away. Last couple of weeks have been rough for the Eels. We had the morning of the loss of Michael Collins, who was a goal kicker in the 1980s midweek cup winning team. And we also lost Alan Overton, who was one of the titans of the club when it comes to running the place. What did Ovo mean to the Eels?
Before Ovo, there was Jersey Komorowski. Jersey was our spring coach for years and years, and it was probably Bob Riley's best mate, and we lost Jersey a few months ago, and then Michael Collins, who played with us for a lot of years actually, and Michael was a wonderful winger and fullback, terrific goal kicker, and we've lost Michael and Ovo, and Alan Overton for us was, I suppose he was the father of the club for us, and he treated every person, whether they were player or official or a family member or a friend of anybody, treated everyone the same, and it was just a special person who gave lots, not only to the Parramatta community, but to all the people around him. And he gave so much to Parramatta and the football club, we can't repay the debt.
Steve, we've just spoken about your connection with players coming through the grades and from junior football. Tonight in the reserve grade, we've got a number of players who earlier this year were part of the winning SG Ball team. They were elevated to the Jersey Flegg, which is under 21s, after the conclusion of the SG Ball. They're now playing either their first or second game for reserve grade. What was the fastest rise that you know of any of your peers back in the day?
Oh, that's probably a tough question. I played first grade at 18. Eric played first grade at 18. It was probably a bit different back then, where third grade you're playing against men,
yes,
who were first graders being dropped or been in the club for a long time. So we're playing against like hardened players, where young players coming through haven't got that. But I think if they're good enough, it doesn't matter how young they are. If they're good enough, they're good enough to play.
But I guess what you're saying is important for people to remember, because when they're playing Jersey Flegg, they're still playing age-restricted football. Like you said, they're not playing older players like was the case in the old third grade days. This is, for a number of them, their first outing against older players. So, I mean, is it something where we need to, when we're watching them, that we bear that in mind? Is it something where they're simply going to be better for the run against older players? I mean, should we have realistic expectations?
Well, I think the more you play against better players or older players, it actually gives you a bit more confidence, number one. Number two, always found that the higher you go up, the easier it is. It's probably condescending, but I actually found it a lot easier playing in a higher grade, and because you worry more about your job and not anybody else's job. So it's a lot easier, but it is tougher in regards to the pace of the game because the pace is faster. Hits might be harder, but I think if they're good enough, they'll stand up and they'll be okay.
Something that I did want to ask you now about what you've just said, because we've sometimes seen that same thing that you mentioned, a player who seems to get better the higher they move up through the grades, and it's been suggested to me as well that the reason they start to look better is that when they're in a lower grade or in an age team, they may be seeing things out on the field that their teammates don't see. And so their teammates aren't reading them and what they do. But as they're moving up into through higher grades, they're playing alongside people who are maybe, again, seeing things at the level that they are, can read them a bit better as a player, and therefore, they combine better.
Probably a good example, I'll use Sterlo as a good example. Everyone knows how good Sterlo is. If Sterlo played third grade and Sterlo did what he normally does and creates, he won't have the people hitting the holes that he needs to. So he's going to get hit and belted a lot more. He goes up to second grade, does the same thing. More people are going to hit the hole, but not as many. He's still going to get hit and knocked down a bit. He goes up in the first grade and creates, there's always someone there. So it's just that I suppose that expectation of you do your job, let other people do their job. The higher you go in the grade, the easier it is to actually expect people to be where they need to be.
And you spoke about how you and Eric Grove played together for pretty much all your football. How advantageous is it to have teammates that you play with through the grades, from juniors right through to the senior grades? Do you develop a deeper trust and understanding of those players? Do you sort of understand their ticks, their quirks, what makes them, operate better on a football field?
What makes Eric so lazy? Yeah, it's a hard one. I suppose it's a good question. I think it's nice to have players that you come through with because you've always played with them and they know your game, you know theirs, you know you can trust them. But it's also good to build that trust with other players around you, and I'm more lucky enough to build that trust with a lot of good players. And I suppose what was good about us is when we had our side together, we had a lot of older players who knew how to build trust, and they brought us younger players along for the ride. So that was a benefit for us.
Steve, do you think youth is the way to go now for the Eels? I mean, we've been a bit skinny in the depth roster, in the depth charts with our roster this year. So, do we hit the marketplace hard? Do we develop the youth? What do you think the answer is?
I'm going to write a crystal ball.
Yeah. I'm going to get you for crystal ball in a second.
Look, I honestly don't know. I mean, I always found youth to be, I suppose, beneficial, but you've got to have the right kids come through. You bring the wrong kids through, it's not going to work for you. So you've got to have the kids come through who actually got not only talent, but the drive and know how to work hard and they want to learn. I think one of the issues that we have is a lot of kids get told as they're coming through how good they are, and they get told they're going to make it, and when they get to the situation where they're up against players who are a lot better than them, they don't cope very well because they haven't come up against that before. But I think be able for young kids to come through, they've got to have the drive and have that commitment to work hard.
Actually, just on that, and I think it's something that maybe needs to be considered in junior football. If you played for a junior club, and you were wiping all of the opposition teams, would it be more beneficial for your club, your junior club, to split that into two teams and develop the players? And I'm talking from the point of view of having players who can go on and play junior representative football, because if they're just beating everyone and just mercying teams each week,
how much can you take out of those?
How much development do they get out of that?
Well, I think you don't get development if you're playing easy games every week. You've got to be able to play against tough players. You've got to be able to tough it out. You've got to be able to learn to take hits. You've got to be able to learn to understand where your ability is at and know what you need to do to improve. And it's an ongoing process. It's something that if someone's got the drive to learn and it's got the drive to better themselves, that's good. If someone thinks that they're the best player and they're not willing to improve, they're going to struggle, because there's always going to be players coming through who are going to be better. So to me, it always comes down to their commitment and drive.
The season is starting to wind down. The Eels are still in the hunt for the finals mathematically. They have to win both tonight and against the Penrith Panthers in order to play postseason footy. No Mitchell Moses. They've got some players back though this week in Reg and Mike Acevo. How unrealistic is it to get those 2 wins across the next 2 weeks?
I mean, there's no reason why we can't do it. It all comes down. I mean, the game plan is always important. I suppose the thing that we always look at is what's the drive within the player themselves. Yep. So it's going to be up to every individual to not only to play to their potential, but push themselves through and I suppose do the extra, which we always call that shows your commitment. So I mean, that's the coach's responsibility, but having Reg back's a big call for us, which is good. Having Mitch out is always going to be a major problem for us because he's such a good player for us. So we have to modify our game a little bit. So, but there's no reason we can't win. If our defence is good, I mean, when we score more points, we win the game.
Steve, no doubt whether we make the finals this year or not, there's been a bit of a difference in where we are located on the table, the likelihood of playing finals football. What do you see as the biggest difference between last year and this year for the Eels?
It's a hard one. I mean, to get where you need to get to, you need to have a fair bit. I mean, it takes hard work, but you need a fair bit of luck as well. So a lot of things got to go your way. We've had a lot of things this year go against us, which has put us behind the 8 ball and made it a lot harder on a lot of other players in the team. And so those even though it might be single events, they add up over a long period of time. And we've had situations in games where we probably should have won and we haven't. So yeah, as where we are now to where we were last year, I mean, it's a different season, different mindset. It's a hard question to answer, but it's something that we need to look at going into next season.
Craig and I, for those that have listened to us ramble on the podcast, have spoken about the things that you can and can't control in a season and the stuff that has externally impacted the Eels, as well as the things that they've gotten wrong, because they have gotten things wrong this year, there's no doubt about that. But when you're looking at those two, when you're analysing the season and those impacts, those influences, how do you draw the line between a reason and an excuse?
I mean, that's up to the fans to to call that, because the coach will give the reasons. Yeah. And you've got to determine is that a reason or an excuse, and that's an individual thought. So, I mean, the coach is going to give his reasons. And I understand you can't, I mean, it's really hard to play 100% week in, week out. I mean, because you might have different injuries. You might have one injury this week, and next week you might have a different injury, so it actually affects the way you run, the way you tackle. So there's a whole lot of things that come into play which probably people don't know about, which I know as players we always keep secret, but it does affect the way you play. But I think sometimes you just got to, I suppose, look at how the team's performed over the last season, and what does it need to do next year to change the way that we've, I suppose, performed.
Yeah.
And I want to zero in on that mental side of things. I mean, how much impact does a tough season have on a player's mindset? I mean, does it get to the point where it almost gets out of their control, or do players simply need to have a stronger mindset to deal with adversity in a tough season?
Oh, look, every player is different, so what's different, what's the same, what's different for me will be different for Sterlo, will be different for Brett, so all the different players we have now, it's all different for each player, so every player reacts to different situations differently. So I suppose it's how they gel as a team, considering all those differences. And that's always a challenge. That's why I don't want to be a coach.
Well, actually, just on that, because I mean, maybe you can give us some insights. The Eels during your era won 4 premierships across 6 years, played in 5 grand finals, going into 87, and we failed to make the finals in 87. Was it as simple as the Crow and Pricey hanging up the boots, or was it a whole lot of other factors in that season?
I think there was a whole lot of other factors, like the Crow and Pricey retired. That's one thing. Bob Belinda went over and he played 4 seasons in a row, so he had seasons in England here. So he had 5 seasons in a row. So, and then we bought him. I just come back from probably my second lot of shoulder surgery. There had a few other players who had surgery to actually knock themselves around as well. So there was a lot of things going against us, which no one probably knew about. But in saying that, the performance we had in '87 was nowhere near where we wanted to be.
Yep.
And you mentioned England there. Obviously, yourself and a number of other players spent time over in England playing rugby league. You spent, I think, 2 seasons in England. Yeah. And how did that impact your form in the actual Australian Premiership and your energy? Because the Rugby League World Cup happened this year or start of this year, and that's one of the factors that's been spoken about for all clubs. Obviously, not just Parramatta, about juggling the energy load coming into this season from there.
I ended up playing 20. Both seasons I played over 26, 28 games. But when I come back, I still felt okay. So it didn't impact me that much. I actually found it okay. Some players it does impact, some players it doesn't. I suppose when you look at playing over that period, Brett Kenny come back from one of those seasons and was playing really poorly. So he actually needed the rest. So Jack actually made him sit out. So he just needed that refreshing. So he gave him a couple of weeks off.
Now we're going to turn our attention specifically to tonight. We spoke earlier about Mitch Moses being out. Does his absence make it an impossible task for Parramatta, or can they cover for losing his kicking game, his organisation, his speed off the mark?
Well, it doesn't make it impossible. It just makes it a lot harder. They'll change our game plan around to suit, so nothing's impossible.
Roosters obviously won the last 2 games coming into tonight, but like the Eels have had some indifferent form throughout stretches of this year. But despite that, you still look at their roster and it's just loaded with representative calibre stars, a lot of big name players. Given what we know of their roster, what they've had this year, what do you see as their strength coming into tonight?
Well, I've always seen the Roosters forward pack as their strength. And us getting Reg back actually gives us a bit of strength up front to be able to combat that. So I think their strength is their forwards, and I think our forwards should be able to match them.
They've obviously left their run quite late because they're in the same predicament as the Eels in terms of where they're lying on the table. Who's in the best position coming into tonight in that regard then?
You can toss a coin on that one.
Yeah.
I don't. They're both in the same position, so they're both playing for the same. So,
how advantageous is it to be playing at home then?
Well, playing at home is always an advantage. I suppose the major advantage we have, if we win tonight, we also have a bye. So we need to win one more game, where the Roosters need to win 2 more games. So that's probably an advantage, but we still need to win tonight. So if we don't win tonight, it counts for nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. It is literally the last stand tonight. So what do the Eels need to do to secure an unlikely win?
Score more points.
You know, we've had that said, and I think that's something Brett Kenny likes to say, is that, you know, rugby league is quite a simple game. Score more points than your opponent and you win.
Well, if you stop them scoring, you score more. You've got to be on the right side of the ledger, don't you?
Now, a question for you, just in that regard. What did you see as more valuable? Stopping a try or scoring a try? Now, I know that they're literally equal value on the scoreboard, but just your personal take on that.
Well, I always brought up that if your defence works, your tackle just follows. So, it's nice to score lots of points, but if they score more points than you, it's irrelevant. So you've got to stop the points. So defence to me, is the key.
Spoken like a coach. I like that. Yeah, it's a.
I don't want to coach.
No, he's got the right idea for his mindset there. We spoke again. Mitchell Moses is out. We know that the entire team's got to pick up the slack. But do you look at Dylan Brown as the player that's primarily got to step up in the playmaking group, or do you look at Quinton Gufferson and the 2 dummy halves there as well?
Well, it's a combination of all of them. You just can't put it all in one player, because one player doesn't control a team. There's a game plan, there's a structure they work to. So it's a combination of all standing up and actually doing their part. So it's not just one player, it's a combination.
So if you had to pick where this game's going to be won tonight, do the forwards hold the key?
Look, my wife thinks I'm the worst tipster in the world, so I've got no idea.
Well, okay. Let's jump.
But I think the forwards. I think if our forwards do their job, I think it goes a long way towards winning the game.
Well, let's jump to the pointy end. Let's get your tip on tonight. Who's going to win and by what sort of margin?
Oh, look, I don't care if Parramatta win by 1 point, as long as they win.
Yeah, spoken like a true Parramatta man.
That's it.
Steve, as always, we appreciate you spending the time with us. We always feel a lot smarter after having a chat with you about footy. And we also would like to thank all of you for coming along tonight. Unless there's some sort of miracle where the Eels are playing a home final, this is our last appearance in Parramatta Leagues Club for the season. So thank you for coming along. Our thanks to Parramatta Leagues Club for making the Leagues Club the home of the Eels. Ladies and gentlemen, can you thank Steve Ella?
Thank you.
And Steve, you're available for any photos or have a bit of a chat?
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, so again, thank you everyone, and go you mighty Eels.